second session. Welcome. Second webinar on the violent radicalization of youth and how we can help support our young people so that they feel a sense of belonging and the support they need to be able to make the right choices. So thank you, Tasleem, for joining us. And it looks like everybody on the call and on the web are repeat participants. So I'll let you get to it.
Okay. Well, it's nice to have everyone back. Can everyone hear me? Yep. Okay. So we're going to do it like last time. I'm going to be looking for Rachel for cues because hers is the only face. But again, at any time, if there are any questions or concerns or things that aren't clear, just stop me at any time. But just from last time, are there any thoughts or questions or concerns?
We just sorry.
No?
This is the Calgary. Can you hear us?
Yes.
Okay. Our team was just kind of talking about how crazy it was. You know, we had that training last week, and
yes,
we're starting to kind of identify our youth who might succumb to this kind of thing, and then all the attacks in the world this week. It's just been timing for everyone, and I know that everyone's a little more sensitive to this issue than usual, and I can only imagine how your week has been with all this stuff. But we're just all here tuning in and ready to go.
Well, why don't you tell me what your thoughts are?
About what?
Everything that's happening. Because ultimately, if you're wondering about what's happening, the kids probably are too.
I think that it's pretty freaky. I think having it in France is scary because it really shows you that it could happen anywhere, and it could happen in Canada.
Yes.
So I just think that it kind of made everything a little bit more real for everyone, especially since there was that speech from the ISIL leader talking about Canada.
Yep.
So yeah, I just think that it's really good timing that we're just, hopefully we can notice some patterns early with our youth and come to their assistance before they do end up joining in with something like this.
No, absolutely. Sorry, there's just some sort of feedback on the phone. Are you hearing feedback when I'm speaking as well?
No, I'm not.
No,
okay.
I think it was somebody else.
Somebody else? Okay. So you know the slide that I have on right now, actually, when I was talking about the different potential pathways that could lead to violence and different kind of outcomes, and that it's a process. Does anybody recognize who this person is? Calgary will be interested because it's Damien Claremont. Are you familiar with Damien Claremont?
No, we aren't.
No? Okay, so 2 years ago, I want to say 2-3 years ago, he was one of the radicalized youth who actually originated, well not originated, but grew up in I think Nova Scotia, but moved to Calgary and was radicalized in Calgary. There was a group of them who became friends, who went off to Syria to fight. So when we talked about, I'm going to call it domestic terrorism, so kids who are born, who are citizens of this country, who go down this path, him and a group of friends really started shedding the light on Canadians. And, you know, whether you want to call it domestic or homegrown terrorism, that's the kind of lingo that was used in the media. He was one of them. And his trajectory, we'll try, if we have time, we'll go through an in-depth case study next week on him. But there were vulnerabilities, there were different things in his life happening at every stage where when we talked about the vulnerabilities, when we talked about the behavioral changes, he could have been, I mean, he is a case study in all of that. So as much as we think that it's happening more so now, we've actually been dealing with this for at least 5 years, where we've been paying more attention to it. So Paris was horrible. Paris is horrible. Lebanon is horrible. Kenya is horrible. I mean, it's happening all around the world, and I think Paris made it a little bit closer to home just because it's a Western country. There's a lot more security. Intelligence and law enforcement officers, they're a little bit more rigorous in this, and if it can happen there, then yes, for sure, it can happen in Canada, and that makes it really frightening. And that makes it frightening for the kids too, because they're not sure now of, you know, is it safe to go to a hockey game? And from my kids' perspective, where it's again, oh, here we go again, are we going to be labeled? So there's a two kind of, there's the safety issue, and then there's also the identity issues that could possibly be happening as well. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Yes, definitely.
Yeah. Do you want to talk a little bit more about it, or do you want to continue with where we left off?
Let's continue on, yeah.
Okay. I'm going to, who remembers Daniel?
That got from the video?
Yep. Any questions, thought about him?
Hard to forget, really.
Okay. So Daniel he was the one who got drawn into the white supremacist movement, the neo-Nazi movement. And he's Canadian. Right now he's finishing up his master's in social work. He's trying to, I don't want to say redeem himself, because I don't think he would see it that way. I think he's just trying to, do better with his life and give back if he can. But along the way, you know, when we were talking about his journey, there were a lot of things in his life that potentially made him vulnerable to going down a path of violence. He just happened to draw on the ideology of the neo-Nazi movement. Again, it could have been drugs, it could have been, it could have been gangs. There is a gang kind of mentality with these kind of terrorist movements. He just happened to draw into that particular ideology. Is that refreshing people's memories? If we think about, I'm going to take away the word Isa, because we'll go over the other video today. But in terms of Daniel, can you think about stuff in his life that had made him vulnerable? Does it ring a bell?
Well, there was violence at home.
Yeah, there was violence at home. Okay, I'll make this a little bit easy because I know it's a slow start. So for him, if you remember his story, there were, he definitely had identity issues. He wasn't sure where he belonged, if he belonged. His stepfather, the one who was beating him up, and his mom. There's a lot of confusion where he thought that the only way to get respect was through fear, instilling fear in others. He had certainly talked about substance abuse issues. He was isolated. There didn't seem to be any sort of peer group that he talked about, any kind of normalcy in his life. The only peer group he latched onto was that neo-Nazi movement. Things about trouble at home that we talked about. There was a breakdown in his family. He used the internet a lot to try and figure out more about the movement that he belonged to. He certainly had questions about his identity. There was no stability, no sense of belonging. So everything that he was longing for in terms of power, in terms of feeling like a part of a larger movement, in terms of the excitement, those are all kind of those pull factors, right? And the identity are the push factors. So he had all of that, and whatever was lacking in his life, or what he thought was lacking in his life, he found it through joining a really violent group. Okay. Does that make, is that sinking in? Do you have any questions about Daniel's life?
You said those were the push factors, and then I guess the pulls are the people who take advantage of that situation.
That's right.
Okay.
Right. So, I mean, the whole initiation things of the neo-Nazi movements, the things that they have to do, just like, again, if you think about gang mentality, they have to prove themselves. And how do they prove themselves? Well, it's through violence, and it's through the different initiation rites to really feel like you belong. So when we think about any types of violence based on an ideology, it's the chicken and the egg kind of question. Are they joining the group because of the ideology, or are they drawn into the group and then kind of take on the ideology as a result? Right? And it depends on the person. It depends on their circumstances. Sometimes it's one, sometimes it's the other. It's hard to tell, but along their trajectory, along their path towards this, they do adopt the ideology for the most part. Okay. Any questions? No? Are you guys ready to watch? Let's watch the DVD, and that's probably going to stimulate a little bit more of a discussion, okay? Let me just bear with me, because I'm the girl who didn't know where the volume button was, so I'm going to try and switch it. So this is, I'm going to go back to, I'm going to remind you who we're watching. So we're going to be talking about Isa. So he was born as Andrew, Catholic family. You're going to find similarities in terms of what you see with him, and I'm feeding you some answers because we're going to talk about it. So between his life and Daniel's life, in terms of substance abuse, in terms of, family issues, searching, he just happened to go down a similar pathway, and his ideology that he latched onto was the Al Qaeda narrative. Okay? So we're going to watch the video, and then we're going to talk a little bit more again about some of the signs and some of the things that could have helped both Daniel and Isa. And let me know if you have a problem hearing it.
Hi everyone, today's experiment is with HMTD or hexamethylene.
Not very loud. Oh, there we go.
Is that better?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Okay.
Allahu Akbar. ربنا ولك الحمد الله أكبر Sabana Rabi Alazim. Sabana Rabi Alazim. Sabana Rabi Alazim.
Right, next question. Page 6. You should all know the answer to this one by now. Hydrochloric acid and what is its formula? Andrew.
What about anthrax, miss?
What about anthrax?
Is it the best biological agent for killing people?
Andrew. Even if I knew the answer to that, which I don't, do you think it would be irresponsible of me to say?
Isa.
Sorry?
Isa. Andrew's my Western name. I'm Muslim now.
Right. Okay, class. Look, we can all carry on preparing for our exam, or, if you'd prefer, we can all sit around and watch Andrew seek attention.
It was only a question, miss. There's no need to get all pissy about it. I mean, this is chemistry, isn't it?
Yes, and it's also a college, which means that it's not compulsory to be here if you don't want to learn. Okay, right, moving on. Question 12.
Wait, you're going to blow us all up then, are you?
Please. What is its formula?
You don't fucking know me.
Andrew, that is enough. Enough! Andrew, enough! Andrew!
Praise be to Allah. Blessings and prayers upon his prophet. I'm going to keep this short and to the point because it's all been said before by far more eloquent people than me. Our words have no impact upon you. Our words are dead until we give them life with our blood. I'm sure by now the media's painted a suitable picture of me. This predictable propaganda machine will naturally try to put a spin on things to suit the government and to scare the masses into conforming to their power and wealth-obsessed agendas.
He's coming back.
Come on, mate, you're all right.
Excuse me. Excuse me. I like your pajamas. Where'd you get them from?
Oi, mate, Islam's that way. What you fucking say, raghead? Oi!
Your democratically elected governments continuously perpetrate atrocities against my people all over the world. Excuse me, please. Can I get some hydrogen peroxide? Support of these governments makes you directly responsible. So I need to get as much heat from the bulb using batteries as small as possible. Can I get another bottle? Just as I am directly responsible for protecting and avenging my Muslim brothers and sisters.
What about suicide bombing?
How can you say it's wrong? The way I see it, they're defending Islam and the Ummah. They are retaliating from the aggression against Muslims, coming from Israel, the US, Britain too.
Rather than war, concentrate on learning your faith. Because then you would know that Islam clearly prohibits killing of innocents.
How can you say that when they're murdering us? The West brought the war to us, not the other way round.
And you are talking about things you have little or no knowledge of. This country is your home. Has it not brought you many opportunities? Through your family, a good education, upbringing.
This country is a dirty toilet surrounded by minefields, and that's why I say
Issa, who you have been listening to? Those words are the rhetoric of people who distort Quran to make you hate. Now surely, you know that. You are not stupid. The Quran clearly states that you must not let your hatred swerve you from being just. I fear that your hatred of the West is consuming you.
They hate us. They are killing us. They hate Islam. And what about kill them wherever you find them? The Quran, it clearly says, kill them wherever you find them. Drive them out from whence they drive you out. And that's
Kill who, Isa?
Well, the kuffar, the non-believers.
No. That verse refers to those who are directly attacking you. Tell me honestly now, who are you being attacked by? Who are you defending yourself against? Who is driving you out?
I'm going to keep this short and to the point, because it's all been said before by far more eloquent people than me.
I'm going to keep this short and to the point. I'm going to keep this short and to the point.
Predictable propaganda machine. Naturally, trying to spin up
things to suit government,
to scare the masses into conforming
to their power and wealth-obsessed agendas.
Islam does not condone the slaughter of innocents. But there are some who would make you believe otherwise. They are wolves that prey on the weak, the vulnerable, in our community. The Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam said that we are all like shepherds to our flock. So we must do all we can to protect our flock from these wolves.
Our words have no impact upon you. Our words are dead until we give them life with our blood.
What's your mate?
Town. Our driving motivation doesn't come from tangible commodities that this world has to offer. Our religion is Islam, obedience to the one true God, Allah.
Brother, are you Muslim? Brother, you're going to have to speak up, pal. You are Muslim, though, yeah? Yeah, I'm a Muslim, yeah. Do you get a hard time in this country, in the UK? From who, brother? From the people, my friend. From the Westerners that hate you. After the bombings in London, after 9/11. I am a Westerner myself, anyway. I was born here, brother. I was born here, And I don't hate myself, I'll tell you that. Yeah, you should. You should hate yourself. See, you are apathetic. You need to wake up, brother. You need to open your eyes to what is happening. Blood is on the hands of all those who oppress Islam.
Blood is on the hands. Blood is on the hands of all those who oppress Islam. And so it has been asked of Allah to make me mujahideen.
And so it has been asked of Allah to make me mujahideen, to make me shaheed.
To make me shaheed.
And I have stepped forward and said, I am ready.
And I have said, I am ready. Ready to bring jihad to the doors of the kuffar.
Ready to bring jihad to the doors of the kuffar.
And until you stop the bombing.
This is my destiny.
Gassing.
This is my destiny.
Imprisonment and torture of my people. This is my destiny. We will not stop this fight.
We are at war and I am a soldier.
We're at war.
We are at war and I am a soldier.
I am a soldier.
Now you two will face the reality of this situation.
Allah Akbar. Allah Akbar. Until we feel security.
Allah Akbar. Allah Akbar.
You will be our target.
Salam. Salam alaikum. Listen, I hope you are not too late. This boy needs help. He needs help. Only we fear he is close to doing something very dangerous to himself and others. We believe he has a bomb.
Don't want to hear any more of this. Please, come out the car. Come out the car. I don't want your money, please, brother. Get out of my car now. Please. Right, that's your bag. Go. Thank you. Thank you. There you go, brother. Have a good day. Salam alaikum.
Unable to take your call. Please leave your message after the tone.
Dad, it's me. Look, please pick up. I really need to talk to you. Please pick up the phone. I make dua to Allah to raise me against those whom I love, like the prophets, the messengers, the martyrs, and today's heroes like our beloved Sheikh Osama bin Laden, Dr. Ayman al-Zawahiri and Abu Musab al-Zarqawi, and all the other brothers and sisters that are fighting for this cause.
you haven't done nothing. Drop onto your knees. Do it now. Do it now.
With this, I leave you to make up your own minds
Keep looking at me.
and ask you to make dua to Allah Almighty to accept my work and enter me into the gardens of paradise.
Go to the side.
A paradise where there will be no suffering,
What's in the bag? Fuck off, it's what's in the bag. Just tell me what's in the bag. I haven't got nothing in the bag. Stay where you are.
no pain, loneliness, or anger.
Stay there! Stay back! Stay back clear!
Just acceptance and everlasting love. Bang.
So, any thoughts? Any questions?
We
Yes.
saw him speaking to an elder, religious, possibly religious leader. I couldn't quite tell, and he was being very reasonable and he was quoting the authority of the religious tradition, etc.
Right.
Why do you think that didn't reach him?
I think there's probably, for me, if I look at that interaction, part of it, if I was in Isa's shoes, I mean, the guy that he was talking to, the imam, was really old, very old school. So he started sounding like my dad or my grandfather to say, aren't you so lucky to be in this country where they've given you education, health, right? And me, if as a 16, 17, 18-year-old, it would not mean anything to me, really, at that age. So even though he was the religious authority in that room, I don't think he connected with the person. So as much as so when you saw him looking at the internet and he was quoting, there was a guy you saw on the internet. His name is Mohammed Siddiqui Khan, and he was a mastermind behind the 7/7 bombings in England. So when you look at the YouTube videos of the recruiters, they're young, they're Western, right, in their speech, in their accent, in their dialect. Like, they can resonate with the kids better. So it's not that the imam wasn't doing anything wrong. I think it was maybe just the wrong fit. And again, it depends on the person. So when you start developing your networks, you also be able to have to find people who can relate to the kids.
One thing that struck me was in terms of building a relationship with him. So I don't know what that, I mean, this is just a small movie, but he was just quoting scripture, like to counter his quoting of scripture, whereas I think he didn't say, hey, you've been going through a really rough time. What can I, like, there was no.
No.
The approach was to kind of counter-argument, whereas I think, like Boys and Girls Clubs anyways, the perspective would be to build a relationship and to get closer to that person.
Yes, and for sure, and I really like that approach. I think sometimes maybe you might need a combination, because sometimes when I love the approach of the feelings of belonging and inclusiveness and asking, why are you so angry? What is it that's bothering you, as opposed to trying to counter, because what we learned before about the black and white thinking, like, it's really hard to counter something, especially if you're not an expert or a scholar in it, right? But sometimes you might need to be able to bring on somebody who can also have some kind of knowledge or some kind of authority on the topic, if that person wants to be able to have that discourse. So when I talk about building networks, you already know how to work with young people. Sometimes you might need to expand your networks to include other people who might be able to have the conversation about the ideology. Maybe, maybe not, but you would be a better gauge of that. And certainly somebody who is an expert in the ideology, like the Imam, wasn't necessarily an expert on young people or building that kind of relationship. So when I do these works with the community, I also get them to build and expand on their networks, because they're not necessarily the experts in what you and your organizations are able to provide. So if we think about Issa, what kind of things made him vulnerable to the messaging, to any messaging? This one happens to be his.
He was ridiculed by his peers in school.
Yes.
And, he did some self-harm there to himself, too, with some glass, I believe, right?
Yep, that was probably the pre-bomb material.
Yeah.
And they practiced.
Justifying the suicide bombers, too, and then he spoke with his religious believer, and like you said, he didn't form the relationship.
That's right.
He was more critical of him, I think, than being understanding and realizing where he's going with this.
Yes. So even in the beginning of the movie, you see Issa praying, and then there's another shot of the community praying, and he wasn't a part of that community. He was still isolated.
Right.
Are there other things that you saw?
He had a distorted view, I guess, and I believe that's how the process gets planted.
Yes.
And it makes it easier for it to take place, right? So I thought the taxi driver actually helped. He did very well. He was very polite and, please get out of my car. He was expressing his views. It's not like he threw him out. He didn't grab him from the back seat and just toss him out. He did take his bag, but, and that's about it that I saw from that. I thought the taxi cab driver built a better relationship with him than the imam.
Yeah.
Which was funny because he would have known his religious believer, but he wouldn't know the taxi cab driver from Adam.
No. And sometimes in this movie, it kind of makes it seem like he knew who the imam was. Sometimes they don't. Sometimes they may go to different mosques trying to find, it's like going to any church, like you want to find a place that resonates with you.
Right.
And because with Issa, he was pretty isolated. He wasn't a regular mosque goer. Like he just wasn't belonging anywhere. He just was really lost.
Right.
Any other thoughts? So a lot of these things were weighing on him. Like he gravitated towards the foreign conflict and what was happening around the world, and he made that his cause now instead of So from someone who wasn't belonging, who didn't feel like it didn't really look like he had a peer group. It kind of looked like one with that girl when they were handing out flyers, that he belonged to some kind of club. But then he moved away from it, and he became more and more isolated. And he gravitated towards a larger cause that was just him. It looked like he didn't really fit in anywhere. He didn't really belong at school. He didn't really belong in the community. He didn't really belong at the mosque. There were issues at home, that we saw in the first slide. It didn't really come out here. But at the end, he was trying to reach his dad. And one of the last things that he had said, it didn't come out in this movie, but when he got arrested, was his mom's going to kill him. Right? So there was still some kind of parental bond or some kind of that existed that just wasn't strengthened. So if you think about the kids that you see, and again, strip away the ideology, I just want you to think about the kids that you work with. Are you able to gauge when there's some kind of change in them, like some kind of that something's bothering them? Have you ever encountered kids that come and just don't seem like themselves? No? Pretty good environment.
Yeah. Absolutely, you can gauge, right?
Yeah.
And especially if you have even after your first interaction with the youth, right? You get a feeling for how they talk to you and how they interact, and their proximity is always, for me, is always the biggest clue to me, right? How close they want to get to me, especially what I'm talking about, right? So if they're very close proximity to me, then I'm like, okay, then they're interested in what I'm saying. If they're backing off, then they're a bit shaded. They don't really know who I am. They're not too sure if they want to hang out with me.
Yeah.
So then, say I meet one youth, he's very close, and then the next time I see him, he just gives me a wave. Maybe he's late for class, and then the day after I see you, same thing again. Then I'll be like, all right, what's going on with this guy? So
yeah.
That's something I noticed.
Yeah, so you can gauge when there's there's a difference in them, whatever it may look like.
Absolutely. There's a lot of tells, especially on youth, right? They're not very good at hiding their feelings yet.
No.
They show it all on their faces, all on their shoulders. They're lifted, they're lowered. Just depends, right?
Yes. So then what do you do when that happens?
Personally? So I usually gauge, right? Like when I use my example, like the first day, if they walk by me, they just kind of raise their hand, say hi, and they keep walking, then that's fine. But then they do it the second day, then I'll try and stop them. Be like, hey, like, what's going on? Usually, we have a conversation. I use humor a ridiculous amount. Like, that's one of my stronger suits, use humor with these guys and sports, and just kind of get them engaged and not talk about anything serious just yet, because I don't want to just stop someone on the street and start talking to them about, like, okay, well, like, why are you, then they'll think I'm just an authority, which I don't want them to think. I want them to know that I'm there for them, and that's my job, right? So it all depends on how they react to that conversation, right? If they want to get right into the conversation about what's going on with them, then I'll tell them the time and place, like, let's get off the street, let's go to Orange, let's sit down, let's talk, somewhere neutral. I'd never, so that's kind of how I roll with it. Every situation is so different for me. So.
Absolutely. And what kind of issues have you seen that may come up? Sorry, I'm putting you on the spot. It's because I can't see you.
It's okay. As of late, it's been pretty quiet for me. A lot of it recently has just been drug use, and then what I've been noticing is like youth I have been talking to for the past while has been the only changes that they have had is just the different types of drug use, and then when they're hanging around the crowd that they know I already know, and then they're lauded in that already, and they shouldn't be. That's the only changes I see, and then they kind of just brush me off. They act like they don't know me, whereas I will point them out in that group, and I'll be like, "Hey, what are you doing?" Because the whole other group will know who I am, and because they've been around for so long, right? Yeah. So, but I haven't seen too many changes in where they've been extremely open to me and then just closed off right away.
Okay.
So.
Is this similar for other people listening in? Similar kind of stories?
How about folks in Calgary? You're awful quiet.
What? Oh.
The reason I'm asking you to reflect on your own interactions with the kids, because I can imagine with any teenager, with any kind of change in behavior, you are going to notice. So the person on the phone, and I'm sorry I didn't catch your name, but the one who said that there were tells, okay? I'm just asking you to remember that you already know what these tells are, whether it's the shoulders being slumped, whether it's them not being as interactive as before, or maybe they're changed their peer groups. So they used to hang out with one clique and now is with another. Any sort of change is what you're going to be observing, because that is what you do, is to be able to take care of these kids. So when we talk about violent extremism, again, I want to take away all those labels and just really remind you that you do this day in, day out. You notice these things, and it's just about building that trust and just having a conversation. So that teacher, for example, it was a teachable, my kids laugh at me, but it was a teachable moment where she could have maybe have taken him after class and just said, you know what, why are you so angry? What is going on with you? You know, how can I help you? But that wasn't, I mean, in this scenario, it didn't happen. But it's about having those conversations. So if we think back to ISA, I'm going to go up again. I'm just going to pull up the slide. Okay.
There's 10 minutes left.
Okay. So if we think about some of the things that he was doing, I mean, he was really clear in his language about us versus them, right? It's people are hurting us. We are being bombed. He clearly made a dichotomy in terms of he belongs to one group and everybody else belongs to another. And then when he was talking about, being able to use violence to be able to protect his group, he really bought into how he belonged to something other than where he was. Okay? And, Rachel said it, in terms of the Boys and Girls Club, and I'm sure it's with the big brothers and sisters, is giving them place to feel like they belong, that it isn't us versus them, it is all of us together. So when we go back to who could have possibly have helped Isa, right? I mean, there were missed opportunities with the teacher in the class. There were missed opportunities with the student. Because if he was belonging to some kind of political group where they were trying to talk against the war, she could have had that conversation with him, maybe. Even with the taxi driver, as much as he was having that conversation, there was also another missed opportunity where he could have said, again, it was all about that anger and the hatred. Like, where is that coming from? Right? The doctor, when he's pulling out the glass, I mean, that's not normal, I don't think. It's just really about having those conversations. And when I talk about community, I talk about the big community, right? It's all of us working together to try and find out, okay, what's happening. So if we think about Isa, and then we think about, if we go back to Daniel, and the reason I compare them is because I want you to, again, realize that if you strip away the ideology, regardless of what kind of cause they're supporting, it's very similar. What was happening in their lives were really similar. The difference between Isa and Daniel, can anybody spot it? Or you want me to just give you the answer?
So substance abuse, was Isa abusing substances as well, or?
Yes.
Was?
Isa?
Yeah?
Yeah.
I thought he had substance abuse too.
Pardon me?
I thought Isa had substance abuse as well. I thought I saw it on the list of things.
Yep. So they both have substance abuse.
Okay.
My mistake.
Nope. We went through that first slide last week, and we kind of went through it quickly today, so it wasn't a really yeah, and they didn't really show it in the video.
Was there isolation on Isa's?
Yep, Isa was pretty isolated. You know, when I was talking about him praying alone, about him not really belonging to any kind of group, even when he was looking up the internet and really looking at the messaging, he was kind of doing it on his own.
Oh, because my interpretation of isolation is like he had his peers, right? He had his leaders that were still talking with him, where Daniel had a group, and then that group betrayed him and became isolated, right? So I just had a different interpretation of isolation, so that's my bad. Yeah, no, and that's good. I mean, there are different forms of isolation, so you're right. So with Isa, and even people who, you know, they think that, oh, he's just only on the internet, it is a social, it's a different way of interacting. But for him, what I saw with Isa was that he, you know, at least when he was belonging to some kind of peer group, he kind of changed it, right? So he wasn't really belonging to anything in school. He wasn't belonging to anything in the community. And with Daniel, he felt isolated from, I guess, the norm, right? Like the social norm groups. So the biggest difference, right? It was hard to see with Daniel. He didn't really talk about his school. I can imagine it happened, but because it wasn't really clear, you didn't really see that. Daniel didn't have issues with religion or, right? I mean, that wasn't his motivating factor. And there was a lot more trauma and abuse at home that you saw with Daniel. You didn't see that with Isa. Okay. So the trauma and abuse were big for Daniel. That was part of his trajectory. So again, if you look at the push-pull factors, if you look at the behavioral indicators, really similar. The us versus them is huge. As soon as, you know, we start hearing about kids talking about how they are different somehow, and there's a sense of being unique, which is not what I'm talking about, but when they start dichotomizing groups into one group is better than the other, the us versus them, the arrogance and the superiority that comes with belonging to one particular group over the other, that for me is a big flag. And then when they start talking about the hatred, that of course is another huge flag. Do you have any questions about what we saw? Is it starting to, are the pieces sort of starting to fit together a little bit better? Mm-hmm. Yeah? Okay. Well, I'm going to give you guys a homework assignment. Yay! So for next week, and certainly you can either email me or email Rachel if you don't want to talk about them out loud. But any sort of young people that you've worked with, and it doesn't have to necessarily be about radicalization, but really about stories of kids that you have worked with where you've seen this kind of change, right, and kind of what you've done to help them. So part of it is recognizing that, you know, there are tells along the way, and then how can you help them along the way? What kind of things can you do? And if you're not able to, who else can you draw in from the community to help? Right? Whether it's a social worker, whether it's a psychologist, whether it's a faith leader, whether it is whoever you think you need to tap into. Are you guys comfortable with that? Mm-hmm. Yeah. Next week what we'll do is I'll go through the case study of Damien Claremont, and we'll kind of go through the different phases of his life, and we'll talk about what are the vulnerabilities that you were able to see, and then what kind of resources could we have drawn on to be able to help him along the way. Are you guys okay with that?
Yeah.
Fantastic.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and again, like last time, if there are any specific questions, feel free to ask me or pass them along to Rachel, and I'll answer them.
Okay. And I'll send the invitations for the next webinar to everybody.
Okay, perfect.
Great. Thank you so much, Tasleem.
Hey, you're welcome.
Do you have questions?
Thank you. You're welcome. Have a great afternoon.
All right.
You too.
Okay.
Bye now.
Bye.